we can secure quorum so we can get started. We are still missing a couple of them, so we're going to give them a couple minutes to. In the meantime, we do want to encourage those of you that are live with us today to oversee to take a look at the city's advisory board agendas in the past, as well as the work that we have in, as well as our sister organization, CPP, um, and to review the the cases that they've they've seen, but the various policies that we have been all working on. And for example, we're going to be having a presentation, hopefully, if we have um, quorum, that will be discussing the policies that and the know your rights on different situations. So we hope that you continue stopping in. Our meetings are on Mondays, on the third Monday. Remind me, Gerald, third or fourth? Third, right?
Third Monday of each month.
Fourth, fourth Monday of the month.
That's right.
So if for whatever reason today we to have our meeting, please join us again next month so that we can continue this work to improve the community relations between our community as well as our law enforcement. Let me just remind my children that I'm in a live meeting. Excuse me.
Hi, Stephanie. We have a Dina Whining, and then we have a call-in user 2 on the phone. Oh, Polly's here. Good evening, Polly.
Cool.
Good evening. Sorry for the delay.
I believe. Thank you, Polly. Maybe call-in user 2 might be Kathy. She says she's trying to get in. Let me check.
Does anyone know Adina? Whining?
I didn't catch the name.
She's just observing, so. Thank you, ma'am, for coming. Let's see more. Pastor Hodges. We have a Mr. Donovan. Mr. Michael Donovan. Mr. Castillo. Good evening, Chief. How are you?
There's Kathy.
And I see Mr. Hodges.
And
Yeah. So Mr. Hodges
We're
is to be let in. Look.
is the one, and you couldn't click on it. I can hear me on there.
Yes, we just need Kathy and Pastor Dennis in so we can start the meeting.
I think Pastor Dennis is in the attendees room waiting
Okay.
to be permitted.
Well, it's Kathy.
Okay. All right, sir. All right. Okay. I have admitted, and then Kathy.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know who Michael Donovan is. I'll go back to that. Mr. Donovan, will you identify yourself, sir? Okay. And I've got a Daniel Castillo. He's a local
Community
resident.
member.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is
Did James Holiday RSVP?
James said he
No.
couldn't make it.
But I think we do have quorum.
Yeah,
Correct.
we have 8 out of the 8 possible. So
All right, so then let's go ahead and call this meeting to order at 6:08. Take a look at the agenda here. Mr. Ilko, can you please do roll call? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm moving out of sequence on the agenda. We're going to begin with our vice chair, Ms. Jenkins, if you can please do an overview so that the public can understand the purpose of the Citizens Advisory Board on Police and Community Relations, please.
Certainly. Thank you for joining us this evening. So the Citizens Advisory Board on Police and Community Relations was originally founded in 1990, and it met through 1999 and then lapsed due to becoming inactive. It was reinstated again in 2016. I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. And then started meeting again in 2017. In response to needs in the community around policing issues. Members to participate in recommending and reviewing policies, practices, and programs designed to make law enforcement more sensitive, effective, and responsive to the needs of city members. Currently meets on the fourth Monday of every month at 6 p.m. During this time of COVID, we are meeting online. The board is composed of members of the community, each city council district, one member representative from the fields of social services, corrections, probations, or other related fields. Currently, we do have vacancies in a number of seats, and that is a general overview of the Citizens Advisory Board on Police and Community Relations.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. All right, we're going to go ahead with roll call.
okay, I have Polly Dong, Catherine Fisher,
Present.
Pastor Hodges,
Present.
Bob Ilko, Secretary, Vice Chair Samantha Jenkins, present. Chair Norma Sandoval,
Present.
Jack Schaefer, and Stephanie Perez.
Present.
And not here is James Holiday and Phil.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to item number 2. I'm sorry, 4. I apologize. Do we have any public comments?
We do not, Madam Chair, at this time.
And for those of you at home, if you are interested in providing a public comment, please feel free to reach out to our executive director so that he can provide you the space next meeting to be able to participate in any comments that you'd like to share with the board. Okay. And now we're going to move on to 2. Do we have Chief Wadarama or any of the chiefs available?
Madam Chair, we did have Chief Rama called in, and him and along with Chief Charlo, and they are trying to get into the call, and so we are waiting for them at this point in time, and so they have no comments at this time that I can see, and so we're still trying to log folks in.
We have a call-in user number 4. Would that be them? Do you know?
Let's try and see if that is in fact them. We're asking them to unmute. Okay.
They have to be admitted as a panelist first.
On the call-ins, it is difficult to admit them as panelists. We've given them permission to talk, and now they have to unmute themselves. And so caller number 4 is not saying anything, Madam Chairman.
If they're on, sorry to interrupt, if they're on a phone, you can hit *6 to unmute.
Okay.
Thanks, Brandon.
Hey, good evening. Can you guys hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks,
How are you
Brandon.
guys doing?
Good, sir. It is your turn to report, Chiefs.
That was quick. We just got on, but first of all, welcome everyone. And we actually had some technical difficulties with Zoom. We tried a couple of different computers and couldn't get on. So luckily we're able to get on right now, but it's been one of those days. First of all, Norma, I just wanted to thank you for sitting in on our captain's interview. And like I said, we missed the first part, so Norma already might have mentioned it, but she had the opportunity to interview 24 lieutenants for the next rank of captain, and that was a 4-day ordeal. And again, Norma, we really did appreciate you sitting in with 2 of our assistant chiefs during those interviews. And our plan would be probably in the end of May to promote at least one of those individuals to the rank of captain. So thank you.
Absolutely. I was going to report on that in my share report, so I'll wait till my turn.
Okay, that sounds good. And then also too, I just wanted to go over a couple of things. We're going to be having another academy starting here, probably within the next month. We're hoping to have another academy of 50. But I kind of just wanted to give our shout out to our backgrounds and recruiting unit, because they're just doing an outstanding job, and they're recruiting a lot of diverse, outstanding individuals in the community. And for instance, our academy, our latest academy, we had 53 people in, which is our 126th academy. And in that academy, we had 36% of the academy was Hispanic, 15% were Asian, 9% were African American, and white were 40%. And out of that group, 13% were female. So we're hoping to have another diverse academy like this in our 127th academy. Again, that will be starting probably in about a little over a month down the road. We are seeing a little bit of a spike in violence at this point. Our homicides are up compared to fiscal year last year. And then also too, a lot of our shootings, especially gang-related shootings, are up so far in from 2019 to 2020, and then we're definitely seeing even more of an increase in 2021. And I'll give you some of those numbers. In 2020, the street gang unit investigated 85 gang-related shootings, compared with 66 shootings in 2019. This was a 32% increase. Overall, the street gang unit's caseload increased by 21% in 2020. January of 2021 also saw an increase with 9 shootings compared to 6 shootings in January 2020. February 2021 saw 17 shootings compared to 9 shootings in February of 2020. And so far, between our SGU and SO units, they have recovered 20 guns so far just for the month of March. So you can see it's been very, very busy for us in terms of the department. And last but not least, I just want to give our condolences to the situation that occurred, the tragic situation that occurred last Monday, where 3 individuals ended up losing their lives and several were injured. The chief and I got out there very, very quick on the scene. Very, very chaotic everyone involved, fire, the police department, all the crisis intervention units. They just did an absolutely outstanding job out there. And that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Executive Director report.
Good evening, everyone. Just want to make sure that I'm off mute. The Executive Report, we're still working with COVID-19 with the special events,
Now
and
we can't hear you.
I was turning off my my video because my internet is unstable. So I'm going to turn it back off, Madam Chair, so that I can keep us going. Otherwise, I'll end up fading out again. And so that's that high bill that I pay at Cox. It sometimes doesn't work. We are working with the SCTCs from Special Events and Traffic Center. As you know, we have gone into the red tier, but we're still getting calls and complaints into the city as it relates to COVID-19. Of course, much less, but nonetheless, we've had 16 or so members from SCTC, and we thank the police department for sharing them with us. We will be moving towards coming down with those young people around about the first of this month as the Padres start their game. So we appreciate that. We have been reaching out to make sure that we do in fact have a quorum. You should have been receiving 2 or 3 notices to make sure that everyone was here. And this is a time that we've set aside every month to make sure that we have enough people for the meetings. We have been meeting with council members to get their recommendations for folks from their district that will in fact be issued to the board. I'm sorry?
Harold?
Yes, I'm here. And so that's what we have been doing as part of the executive team. And again, we need your support to reach out to your neighborhoods as well as your district to invite folks to come in to apply for those different positions that we have over, as the vice chair has already stated. Now I'm going to turn over to Brandon from CPP to give us a report about what they're doing there, and he'll talk a little bit about the meeting that they had on last Thursday with the community. Brandon?
I always like to throw me in when I'm not on the agenda. Yeah, last week we did have a community roundtable. Specifically, we were looking for community feedback on recommendations that we're going to be proposing or proposing regarding the protest-related policy. We're going to open session meeting tomorrow, so that'll also be on the agenda for the commission to vote on. But I think we kind of briefly talked about it last time. The big thing we're really kind of looking at is we'd like to see a little bit more clarification on some areas, and essentially restating specifically just to kind of say that protest-related activity don't go away or they're not altered. So that's pretty much what we're going to be doing. It's the agendas on the CVP website, and our current recommendations are on or maybe 3 pages of that agenda and document. Other than that, we're also working for the city to get ourselves a budget. As you know, we became or will be becoming our own department, so we have more independence from pretty much the mayor's office and everything else. The one thing that is a little bit problematic is obviously the community, I think, has this expectation that once the ballot measure passed, that we were immediately able to start doing investigations. And then that's not really completely accurate, because we have to have an implementation ordinance that the city council has to pass. And we also need to have budget to be able to hire investigators and a complaints coordinator, a policy analyst, things like that. So we're working with the city to get some of those things budgeted for next fiscal year. It's within what the IBA had proposed. So pretty much all the city council members in the mayor's office has pretty much shared with us that as long as it's within the lines of what the IBA had proposed, that there'd be support. It will, of course, go before the budget committee. We'll have an interview, or kind of a hearing rather, about our budget. So the committee will be able to speak to what they think it should or should not contain. I don't know. I don't think that's been scheduled yet, but it'll probably be sometime in April. So I think high level, that's kind of what's going on for me.
Could you share what CPP stands for?
The Commission on Police
Yeah,
Prices.
Exactly. Yep.
And for those of you that are not aware, that was the result of the voter initiative where the voters of San Diego wanted to have an independent review board that investigates cases on police practices. So Brandon is the chair, and he oversees our sister organization that is overseeing those situations in those cases. Okay.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that, just for anyone who may not be aware, Measure B, which was it passed with, I think it was like 74% of the vote. It does require that the commission investigate officer-involved shootings and in custody deaths. And it also gives discretion for the commission to do investigations on cases that we have concerns about or something that is of public interest. So it gives us a little more flexibility. As you probably all know right now, the former board and the current commission, we're still kind of operating as the board did until we have the city officially finishes the process and does an implementation ordinance. Right now, we still review internal affairs files. So they do their investigations, they give us the case files, we review all that. And if we have questions or concerns, we can go back to internal affairs and ask for clarification, or we can even ask for a change of finding if we think it's appropriate.
Thank you. I think that's very informative for our public that may not be aware of that in the process. Back to you, Reverend.
That's the end of my report.
Acknowledgement that- Thank you.
I was gonna say, I see Robert has his hand up. I don't know if he has a question.
No, I just need to let Norma and the board know that Phil is present. He's on the phone.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just about to say that we have our board member. Thank you, Phil, for joining us. I believe, is there a way that we can add him as a panelist? Because I think he's an attendee, so that he has to stay as well and is able to.
He can unmute.
I'll let you take care of that one, Reverend.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to move on to my report. As Assistant Chief Valderrama mentioned a minute ago, get the opportunity to participate in the panel to interview San Diego Police captains, and it was a very long process, 4 days. However, it for a community member to be there, and I feel very confident, and I was very pleased to see that a lot of the captains, I mean, I cannot disclose obviously due to confidentiality, but a lot of the language that they were resonated with the vision that CAB has in improving community relations with police and citizens of San Diego. I heard a lot of, like restorative practices and community voice and the importance of building relationships. So personally, I felt very, very pleased to see that that's present in the day-to-day jargon that they used in the interviews. And they were very, very good candidates, the ones that came up. And I don't know how much I can go into without infringing confidentiality, but it was a nice, diverse group. And I feel that San Diego Police Department is, we all know there's work to do, there's work to be done, and we'll acknowledge that. However, when you look at it nationwide, I think that we are taking progressive steps, and conversations like the ones that we're having today here in CAB to improve those areas that we need to improve as a city are important for us to continue this work forward. We have a long way to go, and sometimes it takes an inch to get there, and we put one foot forward and the other one behind. And I have I have a lot of faith that our city is making strides in improving that. So I'm very pleased with my participation, and as a school principal that wants to end the school to jail pipeline, it starts this way, right? By building our community so that we have the leaders that reflect what the community wants to see. And I feel very confident in the list that we provided. So I just want to be thankful for the opportunity, and we'll move forward. So thank you for that opportunity. Okay, now with that, we're going to move on to our community concerns. As you know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Bob's hand is up.
Oh, go ahead, Bob. I thought it was from last.
No, I didn't lower it. Sorry, I will lower it. Thank you.
All right, with that, we are going to turn it over to item number 5, community concerns. One of CAB's role is precisely to be able to have the community be able to come to CAB to voice their concerns about ways that we could work with both citizens as well as law enforcement to improve the relationship. And we do have a guest today, an organization that's going to come and talk to us a little bit more about the concerns that of an incident that happened, but also just to provide the audience in knowing more about the rights that they have, especially in particular with motor vehicle stops. And with that, I'm going to invite both Mr. Dante Wyatt as well as Ms. Genevieve, that everyone knows, Ms. Genevieve Jones, right, to be able to participate and give us the background on for the community to understand what their rights are whenever they are stopped by SDPD. So I'll turn it over. Mr. Wyatt. The floor is yours, sir.
Are we doing this tandem, or I go first and she goes? Because I was just kind of told of this a few minutes ago. So I'm trying to figure out logistically what we're doing.
I would say that you can go ahead and begin, and Genevieve can add on to anything that she feels that we could benefit from.
Okay. Let me start by sharing my screen. Let me talk a little bit about who I am, a little bit about my history and background, because unlike Genevieve, I'm not as well known. So I want you to know who you're speaking to and with, and what my background professionally and academically consists of. So first and foremost, I'm an attorney. I primarily practice criminal defense. I'm a sole proprietor, means I work for myself at the law offices of Dante T. Wyatt. I handle cases at the state and federal level, but primarily state cases. Prior to becoming a private practice solo practitioner, criminal defense attorney, I worked as a deputy district attorney for the county of San Diego. I started the district attorney's office as a graduate law clerk in 2000. I stayed there and went through the various stages of deputy district attorneys until 2012 when I left. When I was at the district attorney's office, I had the opportunity to work in quite a few divisions and handle a significant amount of cases. Like every deputy DA, I started off as a baby DA, doing misdemeanors and preliminary examinations and handling motion calendars. I began my career in Vista, transferred down to San Diego, down to Hall of Justice. Spent a significant amount of time in major narcotics, spent time in family protection. At one point, I ran a drug and gang task force, the judge unit out of Chula Vista Police Department. And that's kind of essentially about knowing your rights, and specifically as to traffic stops. Now, generally, when I'm asked to talk about knowing your rights, it's a large spectrum of information that usually comes out. But Ms. Jenkins said specifically traffic stops. So I'm gonna try to focus on that, even though some of the material overlaps with other types of contacts. Now, this is a quote: "The common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any." A lot of times when we don't know what our rights are, we sacrifice things without even knowing we had an opportunity to protect them. So hopefully the members of the community get some information from this presentation and be able to better understand what their rights are and be able to better exercise them. So what do you do when you're stopped by the police in public? Now, the first thing, you always have the right to remain silent. And people sometimes don't understand exactly what that means. They watch Starsky and Hutch, or I guess I'm old. They watch Law and Order, I'm probably still old. I don't even know what the new show is. I'm remembering NYPD Blue. They always remember people saying, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to attorney. If you cannot afford one, the court would appoint one to you. But generally speaking, whenever you're dealing with law enforcement, and there are some exceptions, you're not required to say anything. Now, if you're stopped for a traffic violation, you are required to identify yourself. You are required to provide your insurance. You are required to provide your car registration. But beyond that, you have no additional obligation to talk to anyone. Now, this may cause tension between you and a law enforcement official, but it is your right to do that. And I'll give an example from when I was actually a baby DA, or actually I was a graduate law clerk in the Vista DA's office. There was a young man, he was sitting on a bus bench up in Oceanside. And an officer, actually I think it was Carlsbad, an officer thought he recognized the person. He was a young Latino man. So he goes up to the young Latino man and he starts asking him questions. And he asks him, what's your name? And the young man responded, and the officer didn't believe his response. So the officer went back to the patrol car, ran the name, came back and forth, engaged in this conversation, and then concluded that he believed that the young man was lying about the name. So the officer then arrested him for what's referred to as 148.9, basically giving false information to an officer during his performance of his duty. But the problem was the officer was trying to say this is a consensual contact. So if it's a consensual contact, I don't have to have it with you, and I'm not under investigation, there's no reasonable suspicion to detain me, am I required to give you my name? Will I be providing false information to an officer if I give a false name? And because the officer did not have reasonable suspicion to detain the young man, that could not be the basis for the 148.9. And it further expressed how he had the right to remain silent. So that's how that situation was resolved. And it was very frustrating for a lot of the deputy district attorneys and for the officers, because it was kind of a loophole in that one particular statute. But if you're going to express your right to remain silent, you have to actually say it. You have to say it. You have to express to the officer, you do not want to give a statement. You want to remain silent. If not, then the officer doesn't know. You could be having a panic attack. You could be having some other psychological thing going on. You have to verbally express it. Because once you express that you want to remain silent, you express you want to have an attorney, then now the burden is shifting on the officer as far as if they can engage you later on, and how that engagement will be affected by future evaluation from the court. And don't forget, the police are legally allowed to lie, intimidate, and bluff. All the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, officers can do that. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, even though the community views it very negatively. But imagine if you're working as an officer undercover and you couldn't lie. You would end up getting hurt. You would end up not being able to perform your duties. Now, that also means that if an officer is just investigating you about anything else and they're not undercover, they still have the same ability to lie and bluff. That's why it's very difficult when you're a citizen to engage in an interview with an officer, because they have so much leverage and you don't. Another thing that people get confused about or often get uncomfortable with is consent searches. Now, when I was a deputy district attorney, I was quite a few officers I knew that would ask for consent whenever they were going to search a car, even when they had probable cause, because it was like a safety net. If I can get the person to say they consent and my probable cause isn't sufficient, then I can still bring my evidence in. And a lot of people feel like they're obligated to give consent. Or a lot of people feel like, well, if I don't give consent, the officer is going to be mad. It's going to be worse for me. But you have a right to not be searched. without reasonable suspicion, without probable cause. So you don't have to consent to a search of yourself or your belongings. And you should express that right. And there's ways to do it without being confrontational. You can simply say, it's a perfect example. I don't sign petitions. So when people stand in front of the grocery store come to me like, oh, are you a registered voter? Like, yes, I am. Can you sign a petition? Sir, I don't sign petitions. I'm not signing your petition. I'm not signing any petitions. And you can easily do that when it comes to consent searches. Officer, I respect what you're doing, but I don't consent to any searches under any circumstance. And just take it from there. Am I free to go? Am I being detained? These are two things that are very important. Now, when it comes to a traffic stop, the officer is going to pull you over. They're going to come up and they're going to ask you for your license and registration, things of that nature. And then they're going to go back to their car and they're going to come back. And sometimes they'll come back with a ticket, just give you a ticket. And if they don't do that and they're trying to ask you more questions, or if they've had the ticket book in their hand and they're trying to get you to consent to search or ask you questions about your day, ask you questions about where you're going, ask you questions about your uncle. One of the ways to always draw a line in sand is like, am I free to go? Am I being detained? Because once the officer says, no, you are not free to go. No, you are being detained. They can't later come back and say this was a consensual contact. I put him over for speeding, I gave him a ticket, and then I continued it with his consent. And always ask officers if you can tell them why you're stopping them. Just so you can know, have them verbalize it to you. They don't necessarily have to on all occasions, but it's better to put that out there and try to get them to respond and communicate to you with you. Now, one of the things you have to realize about any traffic stop is from the perspective of the person being stopped and from the perspective of the officer, it can be very much anxiety creating. I used to always, when I did jury trials and I was doing the voir dire process, I was talking about if anyone had any bad experiences with law enforcement officers. And everyone, and voir dire is when you're picking a jury and you're asking everybody all these questions. And no one wanted to speak up. And then and this is when I was the DA, I'll always look back at the audience and say, you know one's ever been driving, coasting down the street and had these red and blue lights and this melodic sound come through their back window and they get a small pit in their stomach and their eyes get really big. No one's ever asked, just me. And they was like, oh, well, I've been stopped by the police. Well, officers too, when they're stopping someone, they get anxiety. They don't know where this car's coming from. They don't know who's in that car. They don't know what the intentions of the person in that car. They don't know what that person in the car has. So both sides are coming into an engagement that can create tension and anxiety for both parties, person being stopped and for the officer. So again, you have the right to remain silent. A lot of times officers say, where are you coming from? You don't have to tell them that. It's like, I don't want to discuss my day with you, officer. If you put me over to cite me, please cite me. Or am I free to go? If you're a passenger, you can ask if you are free to leave. If yes, you may silently leave. Generally, an officer is not going to let a passenger leave. Officers have a right in most scenarios to pat down passengers, get them out of the car, or make them remain in the car. But it'll be slightly unusual if an officer would let a passenger leave for officer safety purposes. But if you're a passenger in the vehicle and you don't want to be a part of what's going on, you should ask the officer, are you free to leave? So the officer can say for a fact that he's detaining you. And then if something happens later on, the officer has to be able to defend the basis for that detention. Now, while you're expressing your rights, you should also try to reduce your risk. So stop your car in a safe place as quickly as possible. And we're gonna talk a little bit about evading later and what evading is. Turn off the car, turn on the internal light, open the window part way, place your hands on the steering wheel. If you're in a passenger seat, put your hands on the dashboard. And basically the key thing is put your hands where officers can see them. You don't want the officer to be confused. You want the officer to be afraid. You want the officer to be wondering what you're up to. So you want to make yourself available to the officer. Like, officer, I'm here. I'm not a threat. Let's proceed. Show upon request, show your driver's license, registration, proof of insurance. You're legally obligated to do that. Follow through and do that. Avoid making sudden movements and keep your hands where the officers can see them. What you want to do is make sure that you're not creating extra anxiety for your officer, and you're not creating a situation that'd be ultra or more dangerous for yourself. And I have a lot of people say, well, I don't have to do that. It's my constitutional right to be comfortable in my car. I don't have to do these things. And that's true. You don't have to go out of your way to make the officer feel less threatened, make the officer feel more comfortable. You don't. There's no legal obligation that you turn on the lights in your car, have your hands where the officer can see. There's no legal obligation to that. But the reality is, if there is concern for the officer's safety, the situation could escalate. Like, there's no constitutional requirement that you be polite to an officer. But I've been around enough officers, read enough police reports. If an officer comes to the car and you're cursing and yelling at the officer interprets that as being aggressive, and you as being aggressive, and then he's going to treat you more aggressively. So I always say, make sure you exercise your rights. Make sure you protect your rights, but do them wisely. Do them wisely. So pull over for a DUI. I handle a lot of DUI cases, and everyone shocked me, telling them, you do not have to do field sobriety tests. You don't have to do them. There's no legal obligation for you to take your eyes and follow the pin or the finger. There's no legal obligation for you to walk in heel to toe for 9 steps, pivot, turn around, walk in heel to toe 9 steps back. Those are not legal obligations. You have rights to refuse those tests. You also have a right not to blow into what's called a pass device. It's a small handheld preliminary alcohol screening device. But you are legally required to give a blood or breath test at the station. If you refuse to give the breath test or blood test at the station, the one that's required by law, then you can lose your license for an entire year. So one of the things that I often tell people when they're interacting with officers is ask them, am I required to do this by law? And if they tell you no, then say, well, I won't do that. Now, pretext stop. I'm not going to talk about this too much, but I just want to make sure people understand what a pretext stop is. A pretext stop is when officers believe that a crime has occurred and they lack probable cause, credible, and/or usable evidence. So when that occurs, officers find another legal reason, often traffic violations, to stop the suspect and obtain consent to search or additional evidence to establish probable cause. Now, when I spent a lot of my time as a DA in dealing with major narcotics, and you would see this a lot in major narcotics. You'll get a police report and it'll read, my name is Officer Johnson. It's my 3rd day on the force. I was driving down this residential street. The car in front of me proceeded to do a California rolling stop. I initiated my overhead lights. The suspect vehicle turned over to his right. As I was stopping, walking to the car, another patrol car came as backup. They happened to have a canine patrol, a canine narcotics officer with them. The narcotics officer walked around the car while I was getting the identification of the person, and the canine alerted to the car, and lo and behold, there was 80 kilos of cocaine or meth in the trunk. Do we really think that that officer was just the luckiest officer in the world? 3rd day on the shift, he just happens to be following a car that has a rolling stop in a residential area and have all this drugs. Most likely that's not what happened. Most likely there was a larger investigation. Most likely there was more additional information, and this officer received a call from someone else, probably a detective, saying that if you see this car and you have a legal basis to stop it, stop it. That's a pretextual stop. And it is legal to do it. A lot of people in the community are uncomfortable with it, but it's legal. Now, reasonable suspicion versus probable cause. These are two terms we hear a lot. Now, reasonable suspicion is an objectively justifiable suspicion that is based on specific facts or circumstances, and it justifies stopping and sometimes searching a person thought to be involved in criminal activity at that time. The reasonable suspicion is like something's weird here. It has to be articulable, but it's not quite probable cause, but there's something going on here where I have enough information to detain someone for a short period of time, you know, pat them down, make sure they don't have anything that's dangerous to me, and try to use that short period of time to investigate further. But it's not quite probable cause. Probable cause is sufficient reason based upon known facts to believe a crime has been committed or that certain property is connected with a crime. Now, let's say if someone's walking down the street away from burning building and there's a can of gasoline at the front door of that building, there's a woman upstairs screaming, "He's burning my house, he's burning my house, he's trying to kill me," and you see a man walking away from that house. Is that probable cause to arrest him? Probably not. But that's probably reasonable suspicion to stop him, pat him down, make sure he's not involved in that. And that's the difference. Now, if she says, "Oh, that gentleman right there is the one who burned down my house and was trying to kill me," now you have probable cause. But just those basic facts right there, you will only be at reasonable suspicion, if at all. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about evading. And then I'll open up for questions from either the board members or the community. Now, evading, we saw this recent incident with that involved evading and involved the officers ultimately doing what's called a hot stop. A hot stop is where officers believe that the person they're stopping is armed or dangerous or may do something violent or aggressive towards them, so they usually come out with their guns drawn. And so evading the police is a police officer is driving a motor vehicle, the defendant who was also driving a motor vehicle willfully fled or tried to elude the officer, intending to evade the officer. The accused did one of these three things. During the pursuit, the defendant drove with willful or wanton disregard for the safety of persons or property. During the pursuit, the defendant caused damage to property while driving. Or during the pursuit, the defendant committed 3 or more violations, each of which would make the defendant eligible for a traffic violation point. So that'd be your 1-pointers. Did you run a stop sign? Did you run a red light? Did you do a legal turn? Were you speeding? You do 3 different traffic violations, or you damage property, or you're driving willful and wanton disregard for the safety of persons or properties. You do any of those things while you're evading officers, then you could be charged under these sections. And willful or wanton is basically where you're showing reckless disregard. An example of that would be if I'm driving down the street, there are cars coming in oncoming traffic. I want to get away from the officer so bad, I go into the other side of the street and drive towards the ongoing traffic. That's me showing willful and wanton disregard to those persons, their vehicles, things of that nature. And also, for it to be evading, there has to be at least 1 lighted red lamp visible from the police officer's vehicle. The defendant either saw or reasonably should have seen the lamp. The police officer's vehicle was sounding a siren as reasonably necessary. The police officer's vehicle was distinctly marked, and the police officer was wearing a distinctive uniform. So it can't be an undercover cop. It has to be a marked patrol car. You can't just say, put the little, what was it, Starship, put the little siren on top of the car and hold your badge out your window and say, pull over, pull over. No, it needs to be a patrol vehicle. Passengers, a lot of people are confused about this, but officers can order passengers to stay in the vehicle. Officers can order passengers to exit the vehicle. And if there's reasonable suspicion or safety concern, officers can complete a pat-down search of passengers. Now, this is just, I'm gonna go over just briefly the different types of searches. We talked a lot about consent searches. You have a right to allow officers to search your vehicle. You have a right to not consent to a search. The vehicle exception referring to the fact that most searches require a warrant. Now, if officers have probable cause that there's evidence of a crime inside of a vehicle because it is mobile and vehicles move, they don't stay in one place like homes or houses or buildings, you can, just having probable cause is enough to search the vehicle. Another way you can search a vehicle is an inventory search. Let's say if you're driving a suspended license and we're gonna tow your car, in order to make sure that we're not stealing any of your property, we take an inventory of what, or the law enforcement takes an inventory of everything that's in your property, everything that's in the car, everything that's in the trunk. And search incident to arrest, you're gonna arrest it. The officer can search anything that was in your area of reach. If you're gonna arrest and tow your car, you can do an inventory search. And lastly, a warrant. Whenever a warrant is obtained from a court, they can do a search. So with that, I'll open it up for questions and let Genevieve jump in if she has some things to add or share. I did try to keep it, as I was originally told, about 15 minutes. And hopefully it was been informative and people can follow up or ask questions from there.
Well, Dante, I think you did a wonderful job, so I don't have anything to add. But what I will say is that I think it's important for a body like this to understand that if a person does not consent to a search, when reading those police reports, that cannot be taken as suspicious activity. It should not be taken as an act that creates reasonable suspicion or probable cause. And I think that you did a great job of highlighting that, but I wanted to make sure that for this particular body, also for anyone who may be a member of the Citizens Review Board, the Interim Commission on Police Practices, that it is so important to understand that just because a person asserts their rights does not mean their decisions or their actions should be taken as aggression or as a reason for the police to believe that they are suspicious for any reason.
Yeah, and echo that. I tried a lot of cases, and Jen's tried a lot of cases, and you're actually precluded for referencing in trial the fact that someone exercised a constitutional right. You can't get up there and say, and ladies and gentlemen, he took the Fifth Amendment. Who takes the Fifth Amendment other than those who are guilty? You can't do that. You have these rights, they're in the Constitution, you're guaranteed these rights, and they should never be used against you or used to negatively impact you. I don't know actually who's sharing right now, but I see two hands, Samantha and Robert. I don't know.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and start with Samantha.
All right, I want to thank both Dante and Genevieve for joining us this evening. I asked them to join us on reasonably short notice, and they prepared a very thorough presentation for us tonight. And we'll definitely be asking them back again to do some additional Know Your Rights components. We did want to center tonight on traffic stops, since there have been some prevailing concerns in our community of late around traffic stops, how people should conduct themselves during said stops, and what their rights are. So I thank them this evening for joining us. And I think this is something that we've seen in recent years because of the advent of cell phones. And I would like to know, what is either the driver and or the passenger in the vehicle's right regarding videotaping an officer during a traffic stop? Can they be directed to stop recording, or some insight into that, please?
I think we're losing Jen a little bit. I'm not sure if it's just me. Not Jen, Samantha. Jen, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. And I do think that there was a bit of some connection problem, but the way that I understand this question is about recording officers' contacts with motorists or folks out in the public. So there is a right to record, but you cannot obstruct the officer in the performance of their duties. So you can record, but do so in an area where it does not get in the way of what the officer is doing. Your right as a person who is recording any sort of engagement or contact includes the right to continue to film, and an officer cannot order you to give over your recording device. They absolutely cannot take away or seize your recording devices or what you recorded. An officer may say, stop recording, but your right is to continue to record. So you do not have to obey a command to stop recording, but make sure that when you are recording, that you are not doing so as an impediment to the officer completing the stop or the contact that was made. And if I understood that question correctly, Samantha, that would be my answer to that.
Thank you.
I think Robert had his hand up as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. White and Genevieve, for the presentation. And I love the balance and of your presentation and your knowledge. I guess we had a stop recently in San Diego. What's the difference between a misdemeanor evasion and a felony evasion?
Okay. Yeah, I can break it down for you. There's actually 3 types of evading. There's 2800.1, which is just simply evading. There's 2800.2, which is evading with willful and wanton disregard. So it's a heightened level of danger, like you're putting people's lives in danger. And then there's 2800.3, which is where you actually cause great bodily injury or death. So basically, it's the level of danger that's created by your evading. So let's say, for example, if I am driving and I see the lights and the officer has a uniform on and it's a marked patrol vehicle, and I just won't stop. I'm not speeding. I'm not driving on the wrong side of the road. I'm just steadfast in my commitment not to stop. And I'm looking back, so he knows I see him. And I'm like, it's almost like if people own up the OJ Bronco, where he was just on the freeway. I'm like, man, it's supposed to be good to be OJ. Cause I know if Dante was on the freeway like that, it would have spikes out and all kind of other stuff. But it's where you're evading. You know, the officer's there to stop you. You know, you're legally obligated to stop, and you don't. And then it becomes a felony when you act with willful wanton disregard, and it becomes a even greater felony, a 2800.3 if there's great bodily injury or death.
And in your experience with the investigation, they start off with a misdemeanor and add on a felony once they conclude an investigation. Does that ever really happen?
Usually it's the inverse. Usually they book higher, charge higher, and settle lower. For them to book or charge at a misdemeanor level, and then for it to go to a felony, it has to be some pretty profound unknown information or facts. I'm not sure what that would actually look like, but a lot of times what happen is, let's say they charge as a felony, but then when they go back and look at the MVARs or the body worn camera, it doesn't look as bad as it reads in the report, or something of that nature. Or maybe for negotiation purposes, they give him a misdemeanor because he doesn't have any prior criminal history. He wasn't drunk, didn't have any drugs, was a kid joyriding, and it's on the cusp. Because let's say if I'm just doing the 3 traffic violations, like I run 3 red lights, that's different than me driving on the wrong side of the road. I remember I had a guy where they had to stop the pursuit because he went on the wrong side. He drove on the 9 for freeway going the wrong direction. Usually when something like that happens, officers just stop. They try to get Able up there to have Able follow him, but the officer won't pursue that vehicle because that's such a level of danger. And that's different than someone running 3 red lights or 3 stop signs. And that's usually how you're distinguishing between the 2. So, Madam Jenkins?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I think my internet connection is unstable. Can you guys hear me?
It's going in and out, but we got 80% last time. So let's give us a go.
If you want to turn off,
Sorry about that.
Sam, maybe that will help.
Okay, let's see if that helps. So I just wanted to get some clarity. You talked about consensual contact. So is any traffic stop consensual contact?
No, a traffic stop in general will not be a consensual contact. So one of the problems that an officer could have during a traffic stop is what's called a prolonged detention. Now, prolonged detention is when the officer has completed all their obligations required to why they've stopped the person, and they still won't let the person go. So if you're sitting there and you're engaging with the officer after pretty much everything that needs to be done is done, and you're just joking, nothing's wrong with that. You can do that. Officers are people. You know, you find, oh, officer, he likes to play basketball down at the Balboa gym. I like to play basketball at the Balboa gym. We're just going to shoot the, excuse my language, but shoot a fat. We'll go with that.
Shoot the breeze.
Yeah, exactly. Shoot the breeze. There we go. You can do that. Now, let's say at that period of time after all the required obligations for the ticket are done, and he's just kind of, you know, asking you like, hey, do you want me to search your vehicle? I think we let me search your vehicle. If you don't have anything to hide, why don't you let me search your vehicle? You know, I searched 10 vehicles today because all the people were innocent. I'm used to finding innocent people. You're an innocent person, you know, and there's no reason for him to still be engaging with you. If you're still willingly engaging with him, then that could be deemed a consensual contact. But most consensual contacts are going to be an officer pulls up on you while you're walking down the street. Hey, Bobby, how you doing? Just trying to make sure you're okay, and you're talking. And that's a consensual contact.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from anyone else? I also echo my colleagues in thanking you for your insight. I do want to highlight the point you made about de-escalation, about how when the public also engages in it, and I'm not trying to like say that we're going to blame the victim at all, but the way that we are asking our law enforcement to help de-escalate the situation, when we as a public also understand that it's a two-way way of creating that tension, and by helping minimize or de-escalate, like you said, that confrontation, it alleviates that need for either person to act out on the uncertainty that one party and the other party is feeling. So one way that I think that we could improve the relationship is yeah, you don't have to, like you said, and you pointed that out very well, Mr. Wyatt, that you don't have to, as a citizen, put your hands out and turn on your lights and whatnot. It reminded me of like when I crossed the border, right? I always turn on my lights and I lower my window so the officers, the Border Patrol agent, can see my car easily and check it out. Okay, you're out. I'm out of there quickly, right? But if I have all my windows up, it just makes that stay longer. So if anything, I want to invite the public to also consider, that's your right to not do so, but also understand that they're coming from a very nervous situation of having confronted other drivers that do carry concealed guns and whatnot. So you want to also consider that as well. Like, seek first to understand to be in, right? And I wanted to also address the high risk stop. What entails, I think you addressed it a little bit, but just so that the public understands a little bit more about what does law enforcement consider a high risk stop, because to some viewers that did not know what happened prior to that incident, they may not understand what a high risk stop. So can you speak on that a little bit more?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure each agency has their own policy, but overall, generally, if there's either a high level of evading, either the person is known to be someone who had been violent in the past, or known to have had guns, or were seen with guns, were coming from or had completed a violent crime. Like if someone had committed a robbery and they're looking for them, that's going to be what they call, I guess, high risk stop is less colloquial than hot stop. But any of those types of scenarios, and in the particular one that everyone's been talking about lately, I don't remember all the facts, but I know he had driven at 70 miles per hour on a city street. He evaded for a significant period of time. And usually when people are doing those types of things, not always, but oftentimes when people are doing those types of things, they're evading for a reason. Most people aren't evading because they just don't want a ticket. Most of the time when you're having those types of stops, officers in their minds are thinking that this person is probably engaged to a higher level of criminality, and that's why they engage that way. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, the policy is good or bad, but that's generally what you see. I think Gerald Brown has his hand up.
Yes, sir. I get phone calls all the time and say, Rev, you know, the police are behind me, okay? And just in one incident, the police was following this young lady and they followed her around the corner and they pulled in behind her and they, after pulling behind her, they wanted to search her car. And so you mentioned an inventory stop. And so she called me and her mom called me and told me, well, they can't search my car. You know, I have rights. Could you explain a little bit more into inventory search and why law enforcement has it? I'm sorry, sir.
Well, inventory search. Oh, it's okay. Inventory search is when they're going to tow your car. So
Okay.
if they're going to tow your car, they can do an inventory search. If they are not going to tow your car, if they're not putting you under arrest, if they don't have independent probable cause to search the vehicle, they need your consent. So I don't know all the facts of your young lady, the young lady that called you surrounding that, but if it was a vehicle and they wanted to search it, they probably needed her consent, unless they either have probable cause that there was evidence of crime in there, they were going to tow the vehicle for some reason, or if they were arresting her for some reason. Other than that, they would need her consent.
Yes, sir. It turned out that the vehicle was like 7 or 8 months out of the tags were dead.
Yep, that's
expired. So, you know, after I heard that and that the tags were expired for about 7 months or so, because I didn't understand what an inventory search was. And so I still a little sketchy on it, but again, you know, does the person have the right then to tell them no? And so what you've said already explained.
No, you can't. Inventory search is like having a warrant almost. I mean, it's a different legal basis, but they have a right to do it. Okay. Actually, one of my colleagues had a case recently where they did an inventory search, but they really weren't doing an inventory search. They just called it that, and they ended up not towing the car. And the judge ended up throwing all the evidence out because inventory search is literally supposed to be a logistical, bureaucratic process for towing the car. But these officers, they knew they had the legal basis to tow, and they knew what they wanted was in the car. So they said, "Oh, we're going to tow it." And then they did the inventory search, got the stuff, and left the car there. And the judge was like, "Nah, this is not like the draw foreign." And what's the game you play with the black Uno? It's like a draw foreign in Uno or the big joker in spades. The inventory search, it has to actually be an inventory. So, you know, and a lot of times, and that's the reason why officers often, when they have a legal basis to do the search, they still ask for consent. Because that's like the trump card. That's like the you know, the big joker if you're playing certain card games. If you get the consent, you're good. You know, and I've done a lot of 1538.5 motions. Those are suppression motions where, you know, because ultimately the person gave consent, all the other flaws with the Fourth Amendment or the probable cause or inventory, those other things end up being negated because they ultimately gave consent. Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you.
Madam Jenkins. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask, we didn't get to this either, concealed carry permit. How do you broach, if you have a concealed carry permit to the officer, hey, I've got a licensed, you know, concealed firearm in the vehicle. What guidance do you give people on how to navigate that?
Well, I would just be upfront and honest with the officer, I would tell the officer where it's at so he can have access to it and secure it. Don't try to get it for the officer. You know, I mean, it'll vary a little bit if it's on your person versus if it's somewhere locked in your vehicle or somewhere in your vehicle. But I would simply advise just being upfront with the officer and trying to get it into their control sooner versus later. And make sure you have your paperwork in order, showing that you have the right to carry and conceal it. The one thing you don't want, who was the young man? Which one was the young man with his girlfriend who had the concealed weapon? And they thought he went forward. Was that Arbery?
Castile.
Yeah, Castile. Yeah. So you don't want that type of scenario. That was a horrible occurrence. And officers, you would think if they know someone has a concealed weapon permit, they should not be as aggressive as someone they think has a stolen gun. But we don't get to read the minds of our officers, and we just got to deal with the situation in front of us. Pastor Hodges, you have a question?
I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what you said, Dante, because I carry a gun everywhere I go, and if I get stopped, that's the first thing I say is that I'm armed, and then they ask me why. They're not showing my ID, and then it goes from there, and then it's usually okay. But you're right. You let them know that you're armed soon as they walk up to the window, and then let them see your hands as well, so that they don't think that you're going for it.
You're in a little bit different situation because you have probably a little badge or something in your wallet that says retired.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a little different than some other people with concealed carry weapons permits. Madam Jenkins, you have another question?
Yeah, so once you tell them, say you have a concealed carry permit, does that give them right to search your vehicle at that point?
No.
That just gives them the right to secure the firearm.
Yes.
Okay.
If you have a CCW, you have a right to you have the right to have the firearm in your passenger compartment of your vehicle. So that would not create probable cause for them to search the passenger compartment of your vehicle for a firearm because you're legally able to do that. But the biggest concern is not so much them having the consent to search at that point, but them having some sort of reaction that causes a safety concern for the individual citizen. That's my primary concern. But no, simply because you have a CCW does not mean they can search your vehicle.
Okay, and we talked about passenger rights in the vehicle. So when your vehicle gets stopped, all of the passengers in the vehicle have the ability to be searched, even minors?
Jen, you want to jump in on that one? You've been quiet for a while. I think I might have lost Jen.
No, you haven't lost me. I'm just driving.
Oh, you're driving? Okay, I won't let you. I'm gonna throw you on the bus then. You want to take her when we keep it going?
You can go ahead and go. I'll probably add to it.
Okay. Well, the minor one is a little bit of a touchy subject, obviously, with what just happened recently. Generally, if the officer has reasonable suspicion to believe that his safety is in danger, he's allowed to take control of the situation, which could include taking passengers out of the vehicle and doing a cursory pat down search on their outer clothing to ensure that they don't have any weapons. So that kind of answers that question. I mean, I think if you're doing that to a minor, you better have a really, really good reason why you're doing that. I think but the Supreme Court has given a lot of rope or leeway whenever officer safety concerns are brought up, and I do agree with keep officers safe, but I do also believe the pendulum has kind of gone to a kind of a
I would just say that you're absolutely correct, obviously. and that officer can search passengers, but we have to remember that in order for there to be a full-on search, there needs to be probable cause. And for a pat down, which is what I think you talked about, there has to be reasonable suspicion that the person you are patting down is armed and dangerous. And so I'm just going to echo what Dante said about having a really good reason to pat down a child. Because if you don't have reason to believe that this child is armed and dangerous, then you should not be doing a pat down of the child. Another question that we get a lot about passenger rights is whether a passenger has to show ID. And California is one of those states where it is not mandatory that you actually have an ID on you. So as a passenger, you have no obligation to present an ID. Now, obviously, as a driver, as Dante has gone over, yes, you should have your driver's license. You should be able to point to your registration and your proof of insurance. Be ready with those three things. But when it comes to being a passenger, it is a different situation where you don't have to produce an ID. But in order for an officer to engage in a pat down, that officer wants to conduct a pat down on is armed and dangerous. And what we mean by a pat down is not manipulating any objects that are in someone's pocket, but it is patting down the outer clothing, not reaching into the pockets, not pulling anything out. That there is a difference between a pat down and a search.
Yeah.
Reasonable suspicion gets you to a pat down. And in Dante's presentation, he talked about the Terry stop.
Mhm.
Probable cause gets you to a full-on search where you can go into the interior of clothing, do searches as in with glove compartments and things of that nature.
Any other questions? I again want to say how much I appreciate the information you both are providing, because sometimes we as community hear, oh yeah, you have the right to remain silent and they can't search you, but then we don't know all the laws, right? And law enforcement does. And so the last thing that we want is to have a citizen arrested for falsely thinking that they're in their legal right, when in reality, when like you mentioned, Mr. Wyatt, like if you are recording, or no, it was Ms. Jones, right, that mentioned if a person's recording and intruding officers' duties, then they can intrude and stop you from recording and actually have you for obstruction of justice or arresting you for interfering in their duties. So I do appreciate you explaining that, because oftentimes I have seen the youth especially sometimes act out. A lot of it because we don't have cities of when they could cross the line over. I know there was an incident back when I was a high school teacher at Lincoln in particular. So being able to educate our youth on the proper ways of carrying out their responsibilities and their rights so that they don't cross that line, I think is very do it in a rightful way, that you're exercising your rights as a citizen. Any other comments from any other board members? Any other comments, any closing comments, Mr. Wyatt or Ms. Jones, right? Well, again, thank you so much. And we look forward to possibly having you guys rejoin us in a future CAP meeting so that we can continue providing our community these trainings, because I think it's important, like I said, to be able to have a mutually respectful relationship where our community is aware of their rights, but also our responsibilities as well in maintaining that peace.
Thank you for having me, Norma.
Have a Have a great one.
Good night.
I'll go ahead and continue with our agenda. The next item on our list is the unfinished items with our recommendations, 30 recommendations to SDPD. As you know, we have been working on these, on our plan for 2 to 3 years, I believe. And we wanted to look into that a little bit more. Looking at the time, we have about 40 minutes. Did we have any additional thoughts on that? Any other input on that one? Like I said, I personally feel that a lot of the recommendations that we have made are starting to be seen. At least it was very evident to me in the captain interviews that there's that jargon. There's still areas that I think, like I said, that I still would like to see some improvement on. Like the officer's right to intervene. I mean, right, the duty to intervene. That was one I didn't hear so much, but I think that is still part of that, changing culture. And I know it's like an educator, how difficult it is to, when do you intervene in a classroom when you're seeing your colleagues screaming on a student or disciplining a student that they shouldn't be suspending. But I think it's something that I'd like to see more of our law enforcement be more vigilant and being able to have that at the center of that conversation. Maybe Jack, what have you seen from that policy? I don't want to put you on the spot, but being on the front lines or working with other officers, what has been the response that you have seen through the union or through just police officers in general, their thoughts of it? Because I know that the incidents that we have seen, the sensationalized events that have been tragic, were a result of officers not intervening, right? And I remember that when we were talking about duty to intervene to protect and serve also helps law enforcement because it maintains their dignity and their integrity as law-abiding citizens themselves. So what do you think? What have you heard?
Well, in my experience, just out in the field, I think it's a standard that we have been held to. They changed the policy recently, but kind of what they did with the policy is took a few policies and put them together in that area. It seems like, so, as far as the changes, I know that it's things that we have been supposed to be held to. Now it's just been identified as, this is how it works. So I haven't seen it in, as far as like not doing it and people getting in trouble for it, because I think that it's something that most people know that you're supposed to do anyways. Now it's codified and everything in our policy over the last few years, which is important. But I just haven't seen it as far as people being disciplined for not doing it, because I think that if there has been incidents, they've actually been doing the right thing. But I don't know. I'm not at every stop. You know what I mean? But I feel like we were doing it long ago. I mean, we knew we were expected to do that. But I don't know how it's changed out in the field too much. I hope that helped. Yeah.
I just personally would like to see more of that as leaders, to be able to have that. And I guess I could hear you, what you're saying, that if you're practicing it, but again, to my point that it should be more, being one of the last policies that were passed, it would appear to me that it would be more vocalized, I guess, by the captain.
Oh, it's being trained. It's being talked about a lot more. But it's, like I said, it's something that we were already kind of held to, and I think that was kind of the understanding of the whole thing. So I didn't foresee that once that new policy came in that we'd see a bunch of problems as far as people getting in trouble for not doing it, because I don't think that that really happens. If it does happen, it doesn't happen very often. But you know, it is actually being, that's why I say it was codified. So now it's actually, they're talking about, you have to do this, you have to do that. I'm doing it a little bit more. But like, as far as me being the union person, I haven't seen an uptick in like people being called out for it or anything like that. I think that they were already living up to that. I'm hopeful that that's the reason.
Brandon, would you like to add your comment? I think that would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah. I'll turn my video back on. It was, I think, it was June, I believe, of last year, and Robert, I think attended that meeting as well. And Samantha, you might have been there too, if I remember right. I think one of the things that the people that were at the table when both the duty to intervene and the de-escalation policies came out was you can't enforce something that's not clear. And so it was really important that whatever policy was created, that it was very clear what the expectations for officers were, because otherwise it's not fair to the officer if there's this ambiguous guideline that cannot be enforced. But on the other side, for the community, I mean, to Jack's point is, I think a lot of the officers may have been doing it, but it wasn't really clear as to what was expected of them. And so I think having a policy, so the de-escalation and the duty to intervene, I think is much better, because now you actually can have something that if an officer doesn't do it, you actually can get a sustained finding. Where in the past, I mean, to be honest, if it didn't happen, someone may have complained, but I don't think a sustained finding would have stuck, to be honest, because the policy wasn't clear. And so I think now that we have clearer policies, it's better. And I think it's better for the officers and it's better for the community. And I think that's why with you guys, with CAB, and also with the commission, you know, when we try to do policy recommendations, it's to try to make it so it's clear for what the community can expect from the department, and also the officers know what they're expected to do. And, you know, there's also accountability if they don't do what they're expected to do. So I think, you know, Jack would be able to tell you more about what's actually happening on the department side. I think from a community side, I think the community has been very clear in their expectations that officers should have very specific standards that they are required to uphold. And now we have the accountability. So if they don't do that, that we can actually address that properly.
I believe at that meeting, we talked about how you could play the what if game, and then there's a higher review by lieutenants and captains, I believe, of incidences, and there'll be some learning as to how it actually gets implemented, because it's the same situation, we have a different outcome. But I do think that the department put a lot of effort and pressure on management to make sure that every case is reviewed and analyzed and learned from, and put the expectation that officers need to do this, not as a want to do, but a need to do. And that came perfectly clear in that policy, I think.
Yeah, and just sorry to chime in. I know this isn't my meeting, but one of the things that I know we talked about with especially the duty to intervene and when you have to report things, you know, I'm a big fan of having to be explicitly clear. So the policy, when it was first presented, didn't really say, well, if you see something that's wrong, when do you have to report that to your supervisors? You know, at the time it was ambiguous. And my point was, well, I think it should be at the end of your shift or within 24 hours or something, because otherwise, you know, theoretically, could you have said, like, you know, a month and a half, 2 months later, well, I reported it. Well, you reported it 2 months after the fact. That doesn't do anything. So we felt it was really important, and the department ended up doing it, was it needed to be at the end of the officer's shift. So once you complete all your stuff, you do your reports, you file that report. So I can understand if it doesn't make sense to report it within 15, 20 minutes, but, you know, have those standards, but you need to have a very clear definition of what's expected.
I voted for 24 hours, but obviously they decided to end the shift. Hopefully the event didn't happen 10 minutes before the end of shift, though. So I see the issue that they should report it within 24 hours.
But I mean, sorry, again, to jump in, this is one of the areas where I have to say, I really, I think the police department did the right thing here, because, you know, I was one of the people that said, I want it to be by the end of the shift. Because to be honest, at the end of a shift, if an officer is still working on reports, they don't just clock out and go home. They finish their reports. And I think this falls into that same criteria. You still need to finish everything that you were doing on your duty shift and get that done. And yes, they will get overtime if needed. But I think this is an area where the department did the right thing, and I think they did what the community expects. And so I think we have to applaud them for when they actually do things that are appropriate and things that the community has been asking for.
And I think we've heard echo throughout the times that we've had meetings here in CAB is that ISD in particular has more training than other departments nationwide. And that's, I think, an area that I would like to have our community be more aware, but with more specificity, like what does that mean? What does the law require, and what is SDPD doing? So maybe we can look into that as to bringing that training for the community as well, so that they are aware, because oftentimes we in the community want more training. The officers should be more trained, and we're not really aware. I wasn't aware anyway of the training that has and it is continuously going through, and how often they get trained. So I think that, and I know currently, for example, the what is that? The training that the community was able to participate. Remind me of the name of it. Not the Know Your Rights. It's when you are able to participate in the training and the simulations of officers that they go through.
Academy, the Police Citizens Academy.
I think it's
inside
the DA has one too, but I think it's
Right.
inside SPDPD.
Yeah.
And I know that they were looking into possibly doing an online or looking for a way to be able to involve our community to learn a little bit more about inside SDPD, because I think that's another way that the community can really get to understand more of the way the police functions, and that we in San Diego really do have a good organization that's working towards it. Like I said, there's still many areas that need to improve. However, I feel that we're moving in the right direction. And like Brandon said, we want to celebrate the things that they are doing well, to continue motivating that move towards more progressive and more proactive police practices in San Diego. Anything else regarding our 30 recommendations? Okay, we are going to move on to the Ripa report. Ms. Jenkins, do you have data? Didn't we share it? I thought we shared it in the retreat.
Yes, this is just a follow-on conversation so that we keep Ripa at the forefront of our minds as a board and with the community, since that is one of the foundational focuses of the group. So yes, I did make a comprehensive report last month on the findings of the 2021 report, which is basically the data of 2020. And so we talked about what the findings were for San Diego. SDPD did share with us that some of those findings were a little bit out of date, as even since the report had been generated, some additional modifications had been made around either policy or practice.
Sorry to interrupt, but can you explain what RIPA is for those audience members that don't know what RIPA is?
Certainly. RIPA is the California Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board, and it was a product of AB 953, and it required state police agencies, starting with larger agencies throughout the state, to report data on stops and engagement with community members with a particular focus on race and identity profiling. So that's what it is. It kind of, I think, came into play in 2016. San Diego was one of the first police departments in the state, as a rather large department, to be involved in reporting their data. And they have been doing that consistently since then, with making improvements year to year in their development and application of policies around racial and identity profiling and contacts with the community. So what I would like to report to the community, though, is that the the Ripa board has multiple meetings every month of either their main board or their subcommittees. And so the upcoming meetings are on March 30th. The Civilian Complaint Subcommittee is meeting at 2 p.m. And if you go to the Ripa website for the state, there's information on the meeting notice, the agenda, and how to observe the meeting. On the 23rd, which would be tomorrow, is the Post-Training and Recruitment Subcommittee. And that looks at the policies and practices around how officers are trained before going into the field to operate. So that meeting is at 2 p.m. on the 23rd. Once again, you can access information about that meeting on the RIPA website. And then on April 13th is their full board meeting, and that's at 10 a.m. And that information is accessible as well on the RIPA website. I would encourage any board member and any member of the community who's really interested in getting a better grasp and understanding of, how the data is collected, how it's reported, how different jurisdictions are, faring with the requirements under the law, whether our particular jurisdiction is improving. This is a great opportunity to get engaged and get that information. So I would say that is the summation of my report on RIPA for this month.
That is a lot of great information. Thank you so much for sharing. And it goes to the point I was just making about learning about the training the officers are provided. So I definitely will be looking into that one for tomorrow. Any other comments on RIPA? Okay. We're going to move on to our CAB outreach plan. This one, we wanted to see how else can we reach out to our community to get more engagement, to participate. One of the things that we've been doing as an executive team is that we are meeting with city councilmen and women so that we can get that representation. We have started to also use our social media. I'll turn over to, if you could speak on that a little bit more, Sam, Ms. Jenkins, about how we are trying to, as an organization, as a committee, as a board, to put it out there for the community to be aware. I think it was 2 meetings ago, or last meeting, we had an organization that was talking to the fact that they wanted to have more of their females that were looking to go into law enforcement, but they thought that because they wore a hijab that they couldn't, right? And so being able to not only encourage them to apply, but also to not for just law enforcement, but also to look into becoming a member of CAB. Do you want to speak a little bit more on our efforts, Ms. Jenkins?
Absolutely, thank you. So essentially, I've been trying to be more proactive with the postings on our Facebook page. And I would really encourage all members of the board and members of the community who are present with us tonight to follow CAB on Facebook and like and share the page with members of their network and their circles. I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm seeing I'm coming up as unstable. Sorry. But yeah, so, doing that is helping us to expand our reach within the community, helping more people to know about when our meetings are, how they can access the agenda, because a lot of people aren't aware that, about the city's webpage or about the city's YouTube page. So that's primarily what I've been focused on as far as outreach. We have discussed plans for, each member of the board really taking on the initiative of engaging with members of their communities that they represent, and asking them to join us for the monthly meetings. We can only communicate our real desire to serve the community if the community has an opportunity to see us engaged in the work and to be a part of the work. So that's really what I would say regarding the engagement piece. Most of us here are elected to represent to represent a specific district. And I would encourage us all to really reach out to members of our community in doing that.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, this is not about outreach in particular, but I did want to ask if PD had gotten their report back yet from the Center for Policing Equity, and or what the timeline looks like on receiving that report.
Hi, this is Al Guadarrama. The chief and I have still not had an opportunity to review the report as of yet, and I know that they're currently making revisions, and then Chief Neslight will be working with the mayor's office on a rollout, so we're hoping very soon.
Okay, thank you. So when you talk about a rollout of that report, will there be a public meeting in which that's rolled out? Or are we talking city council? Are we talking to CPP and us? What does that public rollout look like?
Yeah, I wish I knew, to be honest with you. And like I said, that's a lot of it's going to have to do with the mayor's office at this point. And I can tell you, we really do not have that direction. But as soon as we get it, we'd be more than happy to share it with everyone.
All right. So let's move on forward to our action items. Item number 8 is our work plan for 2021. So I apologize, there's background noise over here. The first item on that is to establish the ad hoc committee meetings that we're going to be having to continue the work plan for 2021 through 2022. We currently have, let's see what the ad hocs are. Remind me, it's training. Mr. Brown, can you remind us of those ad hoc committee meetings?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I was trying to get back on here. Our standing committees are, of course, racial profiling. We've had outreach, as well as training, as well as looking at policies and procedures. Those are the ones that have been the main ones that we've been working on over the last several months. Actually the last couple of years.
Okay, so we have the ad hoc. We have the only one that's a standing committee, to my knowledge, is a racial profiling. The others are ad hocs, correct?
That's correct. No, it's not an ad hoc, it's a standing committee. So.
Racial profiling.
Racial profiling, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and the others are ad hoc.
Our ad hoc training, outreach, recruitment, all of those are ad hoc committees.
And I want to ask our board, are those committees that we want to continue having those ad hocs, or have they met their objective? Where are they? Where do they stand? Do we continue another year? Is there one that has concluded?
Madam Chair, I would say that we obviously need to continue to look at RIPA, as reporting does still continue to show that there are disparities in policing contact with communities of color in San Diego.
So RIPA would be under racial profiling, which we need to start having that as an actual committee meeting. What about the other ad hoc committee? Do we have any other members from the other ad hocs that would like to speak to them? Would any of those need to be concluded at this point?
This is Polly. I was on the training ad hoc. I think, I mean, one thing, I know our group met after the recommendations were made and circled back on the responses from SDPD, and then reported back to this group in these meetings. And I think what we saw was in those recommendations that we made, there are several of them, both from our group and from the other groups, that were kind of, I don't want to say like basically incomplete, right? Some of them were completed, some of them were not going to be completed per the SDPD, and some of them were needed to be completed and they were committing to working on them. So I mean, I think it would probably be a good idea to maybe revisit those recommendations for each committee. I don't know if all the other committees or ad hoc committees got to do that. But I know, I think it was kind of, as our group talked about, you know, how often is it appropriate to reach out to SDPD again and say, you said you were going to make progress. What is the status again at this point? So that's what I'd kind of ask the group of, if we were serious about those recommendations and they're not complete, are we dropping them, or is it in the community's best interest that we continue to follow up until they're either not relevant or completed?
Madam Chair, I very much agree with Board Member Dong. I mean, it makes absolute sense that if we put forth a recommendation that was reported as being in progress or partially completed, that we continue to track that progress, create accountability around it, and then engage in reporting to the community regarding it.
Okay. So at this point, do we have any, I know that Polly is overseeing the training. Who else is, do we have the chairs of the other ad hoc committees? I know many of our ad hoc committees, we lost some of the members on our board. So do you have the list, Reverend, or can you send out an updated ad hoc list of who was in what committee? And then that way we can report to you who will be overseeing it, and to give us a follow-up in our next meeting of where we stand with membership for each board. Like, it would be nice to have like the list of each ad hoc committee and who's a member of each one, because I know I've lost the count of who's in which one.
Yes, ma'am. I can send that out to you tomorrow, and because we have in fact changed membership, and so you'll have that, and the rest of the board will have that on tomorrow morning. Also, when you get opportunity, please check the chat.
Okay. Is that there's an actual question by I'm assuming it's a community member. Do police currently go through training and education on internalized white supremacy, identifying it with themselves that we all have just by living and growing up in America, so that they can dismantle it both in and outside of themselves? I know Emerge has added this into their training for women political candidates, and it's a newer concept for the mainstream. Curious if anyone knows. Jack, you want to speak to that, or the training ad hoc? Any education, any training on internalized white supremacy?
I think we can come back to that issue, Madam Chair, not to push off the community member, but we have to have that labeled down for an actual item to talk about. And so.
That is true. So Ms. Barton, thank you for the question. I know, and that goes back to the importance of understanding more of the training, right? I know there is training. Specifically, I in the past, I have mentioned it, and I've spoken to Rama when we talk about cultural proficiency, as well as other types of justice, restorative justice, procedural justice, as well as understanding racial bias and implicit bias as well. And I know that there has been training, but to your point of what training, I think it's important for us to possibly have a future meeting so that we can discuss this in more detail about what is it that they have provided. Because I know they have, but I don't know, it could be a 30-minute training. It could be a 1 hour, it could be an 8-hour training. So we'll get into that a little bit more, and hopefully, if not in the meeting after, we can get a presentation specifically that goes on the training that our officers undergo for the preparation as well as ongoing. Because I do know that the officers have ongoing training even after they become, they get in the field. So I think it's important for a community to have that. Thank you for your participation. Okay, moving forward. So that's an action item to take a vote. Do we want to take a vote now, or do we, I think we should, at least we could take a vote that we want to continue the ad hocs, and then maybe next one, we could discuss who's going to be overseeing it. Is that a motion we want to take now, or do we want to wait?
Madam Chair, maybe it might be best for us to get the information back from Mr. Brown and then proceed.
The ad hoc next time. Okay. All right. So we'll table that action item. And that brings us to our, I cannot believe it, 7 minutes, and we have the committee chair reports and roundtable. Are there any roundtable items that we want to present?
Like I said, I would just encourage people to check out those Ripa meetings if they have the chance. Maybe you can kind of run it in the background of whatever you're doing with your day tomorrow or for the upcoming meetings, and just get a sense of what they're discussing and what those subcommittees kind of entail in their conversations.
And I believe you put the link on the chat, correct?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. So if you don't know where these various meetings are at, please go ahead and take a look at that link, and they'll provide you with the various times. I also want to point out that Ms. Brandon Hilbert, the CPP chair, has also included the agenda or the meeting time for tomorrow's CPP meeting at 6 p.m. That's our sister organization. So they're going to have a meeting tomorrow at 6. So if you'd like to participate, go ahead and jot that link down so that you can also be informed of what they're the work that they're doing. Okay. Any other comments?
The minutes are done and will be sent to Gerald in about 2 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Which reminds me, we need to have those on the agenda also. So next meeting, we're going to have to read a lot of minutes to get them approved. All right. If there are no other comments, okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Everybody leave to vote.
I don't believe we need to vote on this one.
No,
right?
you don't.
All right, everyone, you have a nice evening. Thank you, everyone, for being here and making time in your day to learn more about this. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Yes.